So here's a shot of the sauna that I built this fall. I'm going to take you through kind of all the steps that I did to build it and show you around. As you can see, I haven't finished the door yet. I'm probably going to do that this spring. Kind of want to do like a nice slanted at a 45-degree angle bark door. It's going to take a little bit of time. That's why I haven't done it this winter yet, but planning on doing it this spring. So the sauna sits on these telephone poles. Here's a little piece that I cut off that was sticking above the ground too much. I decided to use telephone poles because after consulting a couple of different people, instead of pouring concrete piers, I decided to go with these telephone poles because they're treated and meant to last for like 50-60 years. And as you can tell, these things are pretty solid and thick, so they're not rotting out anytime soon. Here's the back corner where you can see that the sauna is sitting right on this telephone pole. So what I did first is I marked out my corners where I wanted my posts to go down into the ground, my telephone poles to go down into the ground, and I measured that out. It came out to be 8 feet. I built an 8x8 foot sauna here, so I just marked my corners, squared it all up, and then the real grunt work was digging out these holes. I just used a post hole digger and a rock crusher, and as you can see here, we got a lot of trees around here, so I had to go through quite a few roots and a bunch of rocks, so that was probably the least fun part about the whole project. For the foundation, I dug down about 4 feet to put these telephone poles in, and then once I put them in, I backfilled, and then I just took a sledgehammer and pounded them down even further just to kind of compact that ground underneath, so the weight of the soil, it wouldn't settle as much once I built it and put everything in there. The next thing I did in the build process after I got that foundation set was me and a buddy had to cut all the timbers, the joinery, the tenons and mortises out of the timbers that I bought from a local Amish sawmill. Cutting the timbers was probably the most enjoyable part because that's what I like doing. I'm really interested in timber framing. Luckily, we had the right tools, worked out real well. My buddy, his dad owns a timber framing company, and we were lucky enough to borrow a chain mortise to cut all our mortises out. And then the other stuff, we just used a skill saw and a hand saw and then a chisel and a mallet and chiseled out all the cuts that we needed. Here's the look at some of the joinery that took place. So I basically built what is called a bent. So this whole left side wall I built and pegged together, and then I built the right side wall. Same thing, I built this and stood it up on top of the foundation, and then that back roof joist right there, I just sat that right on top because there's tenons coming out of those two posts, and then there's a mortise cut into that roof joist, and it just sat right on top and locked it into place. Did the same thing up top there for the front roof joist. So right where those pegs are, there's a tenon coming up, a 4-inch tenon going into this 6x8 beam going across. And then there's obviously a mortise cut out of that beam, and then those pegs, I drilled holes. Those are 1-inch pegs, and I just tapped them in with a mallet after I drilled the holes. I'm gonna kind of show you guys some of these pictures that I took along the way, because I wish I would have recorded the build, but I didn't have the camera then, and I wasn't thinking. It was kind of hurrying up and building it rather than recording it and documenting it. But hopefully down the line I'll document my next build. So once I got these two bents built and stood up, and like I said, I put the roof joists on. That kind of locked it into place, and then I also timber framed the floor as well, even though you can't see that. Probably looking back on it, I wouldn't do that again, just because it would have been much easier not to cut all the tenons and mortises for the floor and then all the joinery for that and then assemble it together. I could have just framed it up like a traditional floor, but hindsight's 20/20, and it gave me some more practice cutting joinery. But I'll throw some pictures in here of what I have. So after that, then I put these roof rafters on, and as you can see, looking up, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 are on the outside, and then I got 4 going across the middle here. So I got 1 right on the outside, then 2 in the middle, 1 on the outside there, and then the roof overhang on either side. It has 1 more roof rafter as well. I just cut like a bird's mouth joint out of here, and it sits right in there pretty well. So what I did for these is I bought timber lock screws, and from up top I just screwed 1 screw right down into this beam going across, because I obviously can't use pegs to hold it together. Once I was finished with all the timber framing and got that all assembled and bolted down into the foundation, I enclosed the whole thing in this tongue and groove pine, and that was actually not bad. So I did that all around. 2 buddies helped me out with that. I did it on the roof. As you can see, the tongue and groove goes all across there. I cut out the hole for the door afterwards. So I put these floorboards in after I got the timber frame all framed up too, and they're 1x10 floorboards and 8 feet long, obviously. And once I got that in, then I poured this hearth for the wood stove. So I poured that mixing concrete. I just built a little frame here and then mixed the concrete. It's 2 inches thick, and it actually came out really well. I'm happy with it. It kind of has that rustic look. It's a little dirty right now, but you get the idea. Put this stone masonry wall in as well. Served 2 purposes. Obviously, 1, it looks nice, but 2, it's kind of a heat shield from that tongue and groove pine. So what I did with that is I put a 1-inch gap behind it, just use some like furring strips, and then put what they call Durarock on the back. It kind of gives it's kind of like a cement board backer. And then my uncle actually had all these leftover stones that were kind of miscellaneous, and I kind of like how it came out with kind of all the mismatched stones, because my girlfriend laid out a nice pattern here, and it turned out really nice. It was my first masonry project, so as you can tell, there's kind of a few mishaps here, but overall I like the way it turned out. I forgot to mention, before I finished enclosing the whole thing with the tongue and groove pine, just to make things easier, I had me and a couple of my family members lift this wood stove into place. That way we didn't have to bring it all the way around the front, because it might not look like it, but that wood stove was probably 500 pounds, and it took 6 of us to lift it into place, and like another 6 of us to carry it down the hill to even get it near the sauna. So that thing was a pain. Shout out to some of my friends who picked that up along the way for me. Once I finished up the tongue and groove, I wanted to focus on drying it in and kind of getting the roof all complete. So I picked up some metal roofing from a local Amish place as well. And what I did on that was I took right over top of the tongue and groove, I did a vapor barrier, just so that the moisture wouldn't rise up through the tongue and groove and then condense on the inside of my metal roofing. And then I strapped it with 2x4s. That way it allowed a gap for my 2-inch foam insulation. I went with a foam board insulation just because it was easy to work with, and I didn't want to have any problems with like moisture or mold in the walls, and I think that's a little better for resisting that. So I put 2-inch foam insulation in there in between my strapping of my 2x4s, and then on top of that I did a plywood, 7/16 inch plywood, and then on top of that I did my metal roofing. After I got my roof complete, I kind of did a similar thing with my walls. I did my 2-inch 2x4 strappings to leave a gap for that 2-inch rigid foam insulation. And then instead of obviously the metal roof on the roofing, I did a board and batten on the side here. It looked real nice, gives it that cabin-y feel. So I'm glad I went with that because I had some leftover siding from another project that I could have used, but I'm happy I went with the board and batten. I did cut 2 vents out after the fact because I was advised by a couple of different people who just wanted a little more air circulation in there. So I have one right in the front of the sauna here, right at the top. And then I also put one in the back here, kind of a little air intake right next to the wood stove so that the fire from the wood stove doesn't starve out all the oxygen in here. But here's my little air intake. Can adjust it there. And then I do sometimes run an extension cord out here because I have a fan blower when I want to get the fire going real hot real quick. Comes with a built-in fan in there. And then I have a light up here as well. So I did build these benches that are in here. I went with a live edge because I thought it would kind of go with the feel of the timber frame. I'm really happy with how it came out. Some people ask, like, does it rub against your legs or does it irritate it while you're sitting there? And usually I just bring a towel in or wear shorts in here and it doesn't bother me at all. So I really am happy with the live edge bench. And I just had those hand cut by the Amish sawmill, and I went with 1 by 12, so I have a 24-inch deep bench, and it's got this live edge on the end, so it kind of bows out maybe to 25, 26 inches, and that gives me enough space. You have that backrest there, that beam going across, and your bench right there, so it works out really well, and I got that on both sides. After I got the wood stove in, I installed this stovepipe, and that was kind of a pain because I didn't have the right tools. I thought just assemble everything and then afterwards cut out the hole. But what I should have done is I should have cut the hole out from the wood and then assembled the metal roofing on top of it. That way I'd only have to cut through the metal roofing. What I had to do with that was just borrow a Sawzall, and it did the trick once I got the Sawzall with the right tools, but before I was kind of trying to hand cut it and going through the tongue and groove pine, then the insulation, then the plywood, and then the metal roofing. It wasn't cutting well at all, so that Sawzall kind of saved me. I had to cut out a decent sized hole out of the roof in order to fit that stovepipe and leave some gap. Like a 1-inch, 2-inch gap on either side of the insulated stovepipe. But once I ran that up through, this black stovepipe here transitions into a insulated stovepipe. That way it doesn't catch the roof around it on fire. And then I just use one of those rubber boots to seal it from the rain. And I caulked all around that and just used roofing screws. When I go to start it up, it takes about maybe an hour to an hour 15 minutes to get up to 140 in here, so it's not too bad. You just got to check it every like 20 minutes and throw some more small stuff on it. I like splitting my wood down into real small kind of like kindling type wood, and that way it heats up much quicker, and then once it gets up to temperature, that's when I'll throw the big stuff on just to keep it at a steady temperature. It's surprisingly not that hard to kind of regulate the temperature. Obviously at any point, if it gets too hot, then you can just open the door, but I haven't found that I've needed to like open the door because I've gotten it too hot in here. It's just you kind of close the air intake and starts to cool down. So it's really not bad. Like I said, maybe an hour and a half to get it started, but after that it'll burn for like 4 or 5 hours and stay up to temperature. Even after it all burns down, it'll stay up to temperature in here. This door is just framed up of 2x4s, and then I use some self-closing hinges on here. And what I did was I just built the frame to fit, and then I had some leftover insulation, so I just threw it in there. And once I get the materials to build the outside of this, I'm gonna put my bark siding on it. It'll give it a nice look. I just found this little branch in the woods and I thought it would be a great handle, so I just kind of used my skill saw to cut it and then screwed it into the door. And once I have the door finished, I think it'll look really nice on there with the bark finish and the kind of live branch handle. After all was said and done with the sauna, I put this porch out front here, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I like how these stairs kind of come off at an angle here. It's about a 40-inch porch up here, and it gets the job done. I really don't need it for much, because if I want to sit out here, it's enough room for a seat. I just used 4x4 posts to frame that in. I just dug those out a little, probably went down 2-3 feet with that because I knew it wouldn't have as much weight as the sauna, and plus on the other side it's tied into the sauna here, so that 4x4 there you see is only supporting about half the weight. Here's a look at the underside of the deck. I use these joist hangers to frame up the deck, and then similar to the inside of the sauna, I just put 1 by 10 inch flooring, where I did these 1 by 10 inch boards out here. After completing construction, I realized I needed a few more accessories in here, so I just bought these sauna rocks. I got a 45-pound bag, and it seems to do the trick. I just keep those right on top of the wood stove, and that way I'm not pouring directly right onto the wood stove. It kind of dissipates the water, and then even before it hits the stove itself, usually it's evaporated. Another thing that I got that was kind of a necessity, just to kind of keep a gauge on how hot it is in here, was this thermometer and hygrometer. Hygrometer? Is that how you pronounce it? Hygrometer. Kind of gives you the humidity percentage in the sauna. And obviously your thermometer, it's got Fahrenheit and Celsius. Then another thing that I got was one of these buckets. I feel like that's a must in the sauna. You need to have the ladle and the bucket for the water. And then something that I didn't purchase, but I actually built with some leftover wood, was this kind of butcher block. And I just put this together quick because I needed something to use to split some kindling when I was making a fire, and this is just like a nice little platform. I put my kindling up there, I got my hatchet, and I chopped the kindling. So prior to any of the construction, I did a 2D model in AutoCAD, and I kind of did all my cut sheets for all my timbers in there. So what I had once I got those timbers was just all my dimensions, where I needed my cuts, where I needed my tenons, my mortises. So I laid that all out in AutoCAD, and that really helped out when it came to expediting the cutting process of those timbers. Gave me a gauge of how much material I would need for things like the tongue and groove, the roofing, the plywood for underneath, as well as on top of for the roof. And then it also gave me a good idea of the size and like the layout of everything, of where I wanted my benches, where I could put the wood stove. So I definitely think that was a real important part of the process, is kind of drawing it all out in AutoCAD. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I mean, if I were to do it again, there'd be a few tweaks here and there, but I think it came out really well, and I've been getting a lot of use out of it. My next project will be tying in a hot tub to use the same heat source, that wood stove that's in the sauna, and I'm just going to run a copper tubing, and it's going to coil around the wood stove exhaust, because that gets to about 450 degrees when you're burning wood in there. And then I'm just going to put a hot tub right off to the side of the sauna and get a little circulation pump, and That'll be how I heat the sauna, obviously, and then it'll kind of serve a dual purpose, heating the sauna and heating the hot tub. So I'm gonna be doing that this spring. So I'll put together a series of videos on my steps through that process.